Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So my normal Tuesday video is where I talk about everything that I have checked out on my library cards. So pretty much all the books that I have checked out on my library cards right now are ones that I talked about for my August TBR. And so it's not that exciting to re-discuss them because I already did a whole August TBR because I'm doing 2 readathons. So go and check out my extensive TBR for August. That's pretty much everything that I have, all the books that I have checked out on my library card right now, and it's pretty great. So I'm going to instead tell you what I have checked out movie-wise on my card, and also I'm going to do my July wrap-up in this video. There was some mention in a previous video where I said maybe I should talk about the videos I have checked out, and there was some people who said that yes, that sounded great. So I'm just going to quickly, kind of briefly show you which movies I have checked out currently on my library card, and that's because people asked for it. So I have Love in the Time of Cholera. I've not actually read this book. I've never seen the movie. It's one of those books that I feel like everyone's like, oh yeah, you totally should read it. It's beautiful, da da da. And I'm like, meh, maybe, I don't know. I don't remember why I got this checked out. Next is Amadeus. For some reason in my head, this has to do with music. I honestly don't remember why this got made my list. I feel like it was recommended to me by somebody. Haven't watched it, don't know anything about it. A Beautiful Mind. I saw this once years ago. I just rewatched it like a weekend or two ago, and I think it was good. I felt like if you like know the twist, I guess it's sort of a twist, this kind of a twist, not really. If you know what the premise is, then it's like less interesting the second time through. But I like Paul Bethany, and I just kind of wanted to remember a little bit more about this movie. Next, I have Frozen 2. I saw this in theaters once, and I felt like it was really good, but at the same time, I was like, this is a kid's movie. Like, I felt like I was barely managing to, I don't want to say follow along. I followed along fine, but there was a lot of plot that happens in this movie, and not that long ago, I was like, I kind of want to rewatch that and see if there's more that I'm picking up on. Next is Inside Out. I've seen this movie multiple times. I think it's a really great way to kind of think about how you, or like, I guess in this case, this main character's like emotions work and sort of how your brain works. I remember talking in middle school to some friends about how this was essentially how my brain worked, except for a little bit more like, oh, I have a little person who like runs the math department, or, you know, who runs my social studies department. And so then when there was like a pop quiz or something, I'd be like, well, Jacques is not on duty right now. Crap. The next movie on my list is Leave No Trace. I think I saw a trailer, saw this in one of the previews for the other movie, like in another movie. That's frequently how my movies work, is I get a movie out from the library, I watch the previews in front of that movie, and I'm like, well, that one sounds good. And so I end up just like getting out other movies from the library that I don't know anything about other than the preview looked pretty good. So I think this is like this like dad and his daughter like have been living off the grid, then they're found by like social services, and like it's sort of like how they cope with that. The last 2 movies that I have checked out is Big Fish. I saw this years ago and I was not paying very much attention, or it was like on in the background or something. I just remember every time I looked up, I just kept thinking, WTF, and I just like did not know what was happening the whole time. And so I got this out because I was like, well, I like Ewan McGregor and I have no memory of this movie. So I just kind of wanted to see where that leads me. And the last movie that I have checked out is The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. This movie I actually have the soundtrack to, and I really enjoy the soundtrack, but I've never actually seen the movie. And so I've listened to the soundtrack plenty of times and really enjoy it. And I was like, maybe I should know like what's happening in the movie here. So those are all the movies that I have checked out right now. I may or may not actually like get to any of them. I frequently find that once I've checked a movie out, I like no longer have interest in watching it. So if any of those movies are ones that you recommend or super don't recommend, or if you have more soundtrack recommendations like The Assassination of Jesse James, post down in the comments what you think. So my wrap-ups for every month are the books that I finished in that month. So the first 3 of these 11 books that I'm going to talk about, I read probably more than 50% of each book in June, but I finished all 3 of them technically in July, so that's why they're here in July. So let's get started. So altogether, I read 11 books in July, which was a total of 5,076 pages. That was sort of skewed a little bit toward bigger books. I think that's because I had like Eclipse and Breaking Dawn, and I also had Eye of the World, and all of those are like hefty books. I listened to 101 hours worth of audio, and that's not actually accurate. I listened to most of them on like 1.5 or 1.75, so it's less than that in real time, but the total time of audiobooks is 101 hours, which is like almost 5 days. Yikes, that's a lot of time that I spend listening to books. My ratio this month of white to non-white authors is actually like really close. It's 54.5% white, and all, Black, Indigenous, POC people are 45.5%. I know that that's sort of higher than it has been in the past. I think I've been trying to make more of a effort to read more, varied, but it's never been like 100% to 0%, but I definitely think this like closer to 50-50 is higher than usual for me. Also a little higher than usual for me is that I have 4 young adult books. I don't think that's that crazy because I've been rereading the whole Twilight series, so I put both Eclipse and Breaking Dawn as young adult books, and so that's like half of the young adult that I read out of the 4. But I do read occasional young adult, but it just is not quite as frequent as it used to be. I also read 3 sort of official romance books, which is maybe a little bit lower than normal. Maybe that's just sort of a normal variation. I would also say that like the Eclipse and Breaking Dawn and like Felix Ever After are all like romance subplots, even if they aren't like romance as their main genre. And I also read 2 nonfiction books, which is maybe a little bit higher than quote unquote average, but I usually do try to read like sort of like 1 nonfiction at least a month. So to run through my books super fast, the first book that I finished in July was White Fragility by DiAngelo. This is a nonfiction book. It's a discussion on white people and racism, and it was really interesting. I definitely went into it being like, I'm not racist, and then on page like 2, I was like, okay, this book was meant for me, and all white people I think should read it, and I think plenty of people of color should read it too, because it was just a really interesting perspective on how I think that our school, like the author points out that our schools have really done us a disservice in America, being like, oh, racism equals KKK, racism equals like actual targeted like violent acts toward POC. And like that was definitely sort of my viewpoint, but like I really felt like the author did a good job like pointing out all the microaggressions that and the way our society is structured against people, Black, Indigenous people of color. So I highlighted the crap out of that book. I had started it on audiobook, and I ended up switching over to digital. I don't really know how to rate a nonfiction book, but I felt like I learned a lot, and I felt like it was really instructive for people, so 5 stars. The next book that I read finished in July was The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, which is the first book in the Wheel of Time series. I've been doing a Wheel of Time read-along. I'll put the link to the awesome Discord down in the description. And it was really, the first book was a really big chunky book, but it was really great setup for the start of this like 14 book series of high fantasy. So I really enjoyed that book. I went ahead and gave it 5 stars. I don't know that like it actually merits 5 stars, but I really enjoyed the reading and I enjoyed the discussion I had with that group. The next book on the list is my second nonfiction that I managed to finish in July, and that is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. And the subtitle is One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer. So this was a nonfiction book I listened to on audio, and the author, Michelle McNamara, was a like crime journalist, or like was a investigative journalist. And so she was like obsessed with researching and figuring out and the mystery of the Golden State Killer, who was responsible for all these murders and like over like a 10 or 12 year period in the 70s. It was super creepy, but also like I really enjoyed it. And I really wish that, you know, Michelle McNamara hadn't passed away before the guy was caught, and because he was caught like a month after this book was published, which was only a couple years after she passed. So it was a really good book. I'd recommend that. And I'd rate that book like 4 stars. The next book that I finished was Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I saw this blowing up on BookTube, and it's a romance, and it was a contemporary, and it was adorable. I did a whole book review on that book, so I'll post that here, and you should go watch that. But I thought it was great, and I ultimately ended up giving that 4 stars. The next book that I finished in July was Eclipse by Stephenie Meyer, because I'm doing this whole Twilight readathon. It was a reread. I listened to it on audio. Next. The next book I finished in July was Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. This was a buddy read that I did with my friends Savannah at Savvy Reads and Cecily at Cecily J Reads. So I will link their channels down in the description, and I'll put a video up here of our buddy read discussion. This is a book about these 2 young women. They're in high school. They're both Black, and there's in this world there's sort of like mythology. There's sirens, and there's other cool mythological beings, creatures, whatever's. But the book is really a lot more about like using your voice, especially as a Black woman, to like stand up for what's right, and how people want to silence that voice. I didn't feel like the book was like super well executed, but I did enjoy it, so I ultimately gave it like a solid, just middle of the road, 2.5 stars. The next book I read in July was Trade Me by Courtney Milan. This was a romance book. I read it on ebook. I didn't super find it that interesting. I can't remember very much about it off the top of my head. It was good, but not like blow me out of the water. So I do think I did say I do want to read more by Courtney Milan. I felt like this was maybe just like a meh read for me, and that like maybe another book by that same author would spark more joy. The next book I finished was Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender. I read this book because I saw so much buzz about it on BookTube, on YouTube, and it sounded really interesting. I don't think I've ever read a book with a trans main character before. This is a young adult book, and I did a whole book review, so I will post it up here in the cards and down in the description. I didn't really love it. Felix just came across to me as like really immature. I mean, I know he's like 17 years old, but I felt like there was a lot of really good messages in this book, and it was really great for people it would be really great for people who are questioning like their gender identity, who are trans. It just didn't quite click for me, and I think that some of that is just because I'm not like the intended audience. So I ultimately rated that 2.5 stars. Next book is Vanishing Half by Bennett, which I read because that was the July pick for the Page Turner Book Club. So the Page Turner Book Club has been really great. I felt like the discussion was really awesome. I enjoyed the book a lot. It's about these twin girls who are very light-skinned, but they're Black, and the whole town is Black, but like everyone is basically white passing because there's been enough sort of like intermixing over the generations. So it's sort of a story about how one of the girls, young women, basically like abandons the other one and her whole life, and like goes on to white pass and start this whole new life where she's white. And it sort of like follows both stories and the next generation of both of those women and how they kind of dealt with Stella leaving. I really enjoyed it. I felt like our discussion was awesome. I ultimately rated that book 4 stars. The second to last book that I finished in July was Breaking Dawn by Stephenie Meyer, and I was glad to finally finish the whole series because I'm working on this Twilight video, and I'm trying to like do my research and like kind of have sort of somewhat of a cohesive thoughts, so keep an eye out for that. And the last book that I finished in July was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. This book was recommended to me by Nicole Reads. I'll put her brand new BookTube channel down in the description, so you should go check out Nicole. I like this book. It was definitely a slow burn romance. It's a sports romance, but all the sports takes place like off page, which was great because I don't give a fig about sports. It was a slow burn. I don't think I can say that enough. I really liked the main female character, Vanessa. I liked the main male character a bit less. I mean, he grew on me over the course of the book, but I felt like he was too calm, cool, collected, distant. To me, I wish there was just a smidgen more of emotion from him. I think that was sort of the point, was that he was just like strong, silent, steadfast, but like to me, I just never felt like I really like got to know him. I didn't super like love him. There was a, good sex scene, good payoff at the end, cute cliche. So all in all, it was pretty standard romance. If you like a really slow burn, a long gradual friends to lovers, really it's more like boss employee, not even friends, marriage of convenience, very slow friends to lovers book. But I liked it and I want to read more from Mariana Zapata. So I rated that 3.5 stars. And that's a wrap on everything I read for July. I felt like the month kind of started off really strong and kind of had a little bit of a lower point in the middle. That's just sort of me reflecting back on the month. I mean, my ratings don't super reflect that. But it was a good month, and I have new authors that I have enjoyed, and I felt like I am starting August really strongly because I have these 2 readathons that I'm planning on participating in, and so far I'm really enjoying it. So if you heard any books that you really liked, please go ahead and leave a comment down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe and do all the interaction things. Thanks for watching. Bye. But all the